Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Recently I published a video on Necromolds monster battles, an awesome tabletop game combining easily accessible rules with the fun of creating an army of Play-Doh monsters and then smashing them. I was, to put it mildly, incredibly impressed. It was a game that instantly spoke to me, that did all the things I like in a game. If you missed my review, I will link to it in the video description below, because today I am going to be looking at the large expansion for Necromolds, Call to Arms. In general, I think there are probably three main things an expansion can do. 1. It can give you more. More miniatures, more accessories, more missions, whatever. Just more of what the base game gave you. 2. It can upgrade materials from the base game, perhaps replacing standees with miniatures. And 3. It can add layers of rules that enrich or enhance the base game experience or add new modes of play. Call to Arms is an expansion that does all of that, and it does it with all the style and flair of the base game. Just look at this box art. I am a huge fan of all the Necromolds art. Admittedly, some of the character designs are a little busy. Sometimes it takes a bit of squinting to fully understand what they are, but it's hard not to get enthusiastic about a game that looks this good. And all of these monsters are sort of adorable in that Garbage Pail Kids kind of way. The main thing that this expansion is doing is layering on additional rules, elevating the core game experience. For that reason, it's not an expansion recommended for new or younger players. Really, to get the most out of Call to Arms, you need to have played the base game using these standard rules, and ideally all of the advanced rules as well, because this expansion is kind of a lot. I would say almost too much. I think it skirts dangerously close to becoming too fussy for what it is, becoming more, and therefore arguably less, than a fun, fast, accessible, lightweight, family-friendly game system. It's on a knife edge. For some, it may be too much. For others, an exciting addition that fully fleshes out the game's potential and still leaves room to do more. For me, the expansion pushes the game just about as far as I would want it to go in terms of complexity. We will take a look at all of the new mechanisms in detail, but in brief, Call to Arms includes 6 dashboards for player characters. These are not characters that appear on the board, but rather personalities you will adopt as a player. Each dashboard comes with a red last stand disc, a green power tracker, and 3 champion reroll cubes. Players will also receive 3 weak combat dice and a yellow champion dice, all of which are custom d6s. Each character has a set of abilities that can be used to influence the game, and in order to activate those abilities, they will need an avatar on the battlefield, their champion. Each player gets one of these champion banners, and they get to jab them into a monster of their choice to transform them into a mighty leader. The expansion also includes 9 soul cards, which represent special abilities that trigger when units get squashed, and 10 artifact cards, each of which has a matching plastic piece. Players get 1 soul card and usually 1 artifact card at the start of the game, and they can pick which of their golems will hold the artifact, which means, you guessed it, more jabbing. Another major addition to the game in terms of rules are objective markers. You get a bunch of these with different perks printed on the reverse, plus 4 generic ones that you can use for creating your own rules. You also get a set of 10 awesome wound markers. These are so much fun because it is now possible for units to pick up damage without being squashed. For each wound they take, you get to stick them with a wound marker. Yeah, even more jabbing. All of the components we have gone through so far work in conjunction with new rules included with the expansion, but you also get some cool upgraded components that do not have any new rules associated with them. Buildable 3D terrain. You get a mausoleum, 2 short walls, and an altar. They are beautiful. The new terrain can be used in conjunction with the existing terrain from the core set, or can be used instead of the existing terrain to create a more aesthetically appealing battlefield. I wouldn't have minded a few more pieces as this stuff is so nice, but the terrain was one of my minor complaints about the components in the core set, so this new stuff is a very welcome addition. Finally, you get 1 new spellbook with 2 shared playing cards that you can use during your game. The new golem is the Blood Mump, and we will be taking a closer look at him later in the video. First, let's drill into the new rules. To incorporate call to arms into your games, during setup each player is randomly allocated a Necrocaster board. There are 6, they are all gorgeous, but this one is my favourite, Basalt Lazure. Next, place a power pawn on the 3rd space of the power tracker. Place a last stand disc on the last stand section, and place 3 champion reroll cubes on the reroll spaces. Then give each player 1 champion dice, 3 weak combat dice, and a champion banner. Next, shuffle the soul cards and lay out 3, and then shuffle all of the artifact cards except Basalt Lazure's mask and lay 1 under each soul card to create card sets. Each player throws 3 combat dice and adds up their hits. The player with the highest score selects one of the card sets, then the other player selects a set. If one of the players is playing Basalt Lazure, they also get the bonus mask artifact. Players then take the plastic artifact pieces matching their artifact cards. Setup proceeds as normal, but after the terrain has been arranged on the battlefield, you have the option of placing 3 randomly drawn objective markers. The player who placed the fewest pieces of terrain places a marker within a close distance of the centre of the board. Then the players take it in turns, placing another objective marker within a medium distance of the first. Players both then roll 3 dice and add up hits, with the winner getting to choose if they want to deploy on the side of the board closest to them or closest to their opponent. The final new element of the setup process is right at the end. Having arranged their forces for battle, each player selects a champion and allocates any artifacts to golems of their choice. It is time for battle to commence. Necrocaster abilities are the most complex new system to grapple with. On each Necrocaster board there are 3 abilities, March and then 2 that are unique to that Necrocaster. Each ability lists when it can be used. For example, March can be used at any time during your turn, while Soul Bond can only be used after you have rolled your dice to attack in melee, to make a ranged attack, or to defend. Abilities range from mundane but incredibly useful, like gaining an extra movement for one of your units, to absurdly powerful and potentially game-changing, like being able to wound an enemy unit or re-rolling all of your combat dice. However, these abilities don't come for free. They require power. You start the game with 3 power, gain 1 power at the end of each round, and may gain some in other ways as well. The clever thing is, exactly how much power you need depends not on what ability you are using, but where you have positioned your champion. The champion is a nexus, a source of power, and the closer the target of an ability is to the champion, the cheaper that ability will be. For example, if you want to give a march order to one of your units, if they are within close distance of the champion, it will cost 1 power. Within medium distance, 2 power. Within far distance, it's 3 power. If they are outside of far distance, then too bad. You spread yourself too thin and you can't perform the ability. This is so clever. Your champion obviously becomes vital to your success and needs to be in the thick of the action. You have to think carefully about how you position them so you can perform the abilities you want to when you need to. But that invariably puts the champion in the firing line, at risk of being squashed. It becomes a careful balancing act, offsetting the risk to your champion with the reward of access to cheaper abilities. There is a good amount of crunch in that, something to really think about and plan around, and much like the advanced rule for supporting abilities, it forces you to think of your army as a complete unit of interconnected systems relying on each other to be as efficient as possible. Fortunately, you have other powers at your disposal. Every artifact in play has an ability that can help turn the tide of battle, and none of those artifacts require power. Most of them do, however, have a cost. And this is a design in games that I love. Rather than artifacts giving units a stat boost or something that is always beneficial, they grant access to powerful abilities that have a price, forcing you to think carefully about when and where to use them. This fancy hat, for example, lets you move through obstacles. Additionally, you can use it to move the wearer up to close distance. However, if you use that ability, the wearer takes 2 wounds. Meanwhile, this shield can be used while defending to turn gem results into shields at the cost of 1 wound to the user. The question there is, do you let the unit get crushed so you can harvest all the gems, or do you sacrifice all the gems to stay in the fight, knowing that the unit will still be wounded and therefore less effective in future combats? Now that, to me, is just good design. Creating decision points, forcing tough calls, giving players options that they have to carefully consider, and ensuring ramifications for every reward. brilliant. Objectives are another nice little twist to the formula. Only a champion has the skill to harness an objective, but if a champion should finish a move action touching an objective token, they can claim and immediately resolve it. Tokens may grant bonus gems, or more power, or even an extra artifact to add to your army. All useful little bonuses that create more choices, and also incentivize the champions to stay at the forefront of the fight. However, the biggest change to Necromolds comes from the introduction of many new rules that are integrated into the core game's combat framework. First, combatants gather their dice pools. For the attacker, they take a number of combat dice equal to their melee or ranged attack skill, while the defender takes dice equal to their defense skill. Additionally, if a player's champion is on the board and hasn't been smashed, they can add their champion dice to their dice pool. The champion dice has some normal combat symbols on it, but also has 2 faces with the soul symbol and 1 face with the power symbol. Each player, starting with the attacker, can then pay gems to add dice to their pool. Additionally, players can use any before roll abilities from artifacts or from their Necrocaster board. Next, wounds come into effect. For each wound on a golem, a player must swap one of their regular combat dice for one of the weak combat dice, representing the debilitating effects of the damage the unit has already received. At this point, both players roll their dice, and then starting with the player with the fewest hits, they have the opportunity to modify their rolls. This is the point where players can use any abilities listed with the after roll timing condition. They can also discard their champion dice to gain 1 power if they rolled the power symbol. Finally, if a player's champion is taking part in the fight, they have the option to use champion reroll cubes. They spend these one at a time to reroll 1 combat dice. With all that done, it's time to determine the winner by adding up hits in the normal manner. Note that if a champion dice is showing the soul symbol, players should refer to the soul card they were allocated at the start of the game, as that card will define what the soul symbol's combat value is. As normal, the loser in a melee gets squashed, and both combatants get squashed in the event of a tie. In ranged combat, only the defender can be squashed. But if a player's monster is smashed and they have rolled the soul symbol on their champion dice, they get to trigger the special ability on their soul card as the fallen warrior's soul is released in a burst of power. Furthermore, if a champion was smashed, the player who controls that champion should check their Necrocaster board. If they have a last stand disc, they discard that disc and carry out the special last stand ability. At the end of the turn, they can then allocate their champion banner to one of their other units. However, if they have already used their last stand disc, that's game over. The other team instantly wins. Having done all that, if one or both of the combatants are standing, you apply wounds based on any wound symbols rolled for their attacks. In melee, attackers and defenders can receive wounds, but in ranged combat, only defenders can receive wounds. For each wound, give them a good stabbing. If at any point a monster has 4 wounds, they are instantly squashed. Finally, players collect gems for gem symbols rolled, and get bonus gems if their unit was smashed. If their unit is still in play, they can also use heal symbols on their dice to remove wounds. And that ends combat. Whew, goodness. As you can see, the new rules add a lot to the combat system. There are many more steps to go through, and it's important to approach each combat procedurally, stepping through each phase in sequence to make sure nothing is overlooked. Fortunately, it sounds worse than it is, and after a few games it becomes much easier to remember it all. But there's no denying, it is adding a lot of extra stuff. More decision points, more types of dice, more rerolls, more abilities. And that is what worries me the most. I am not opposed to more complicated games, although viewers will know I do tend to lean more towards straightforward gaming experiences that provide smooth, engaging gameplay without constant rules referencing. But I do worry that if Necromolds continues in this way, it may eventually lose sight of what it was, what it is. A beautiful entry-level skirmish system. Of course, the flip side of that is expansions are absolutely the best place to push the envelope and experiment with more complicated systems. If you look at this expansion and think, that's a bit much, it doesn't matter. You still have that core game box. You don't need to get into the expansion unless you are craving that extra depth. And every spellbook in every one of the Monster Pack add-ons is usable in the core game. In fact, there is only one golem in the game that makes use of rules that are part of the Call to Arms expansion, and that's the blood mumps that come in the expansion, which is a really smart, consumer-friendly move that I fully approve of. Blood mumps are the big brothers of the mud mumps. They are much more deadly, and they have a special ability that lets them reroll one of their combat dice for every wounded friendly or enemy unit within medium distance, including themselves. That makes them very hard hitting, and obviously as the game progresses they get more powerful. But at this point I am about ready to wrap up this review, but there is just one more thing I wanted to address. What I really admired about Necromolds was its generosity in providing so many different ways to play, with basic, standard, advanced and community rules, plus solo, 3 and 4 player modes. It was a game that wanted everybody to get involved and to have fun, so I was pleased to see that same design ethos extends to the expansion. There is a section on basic play, which provides a step-by-step way to gradually introduce all the new rules. There is a section on advanced play, adding even more new rules for mitigating dice rolls. There is a section on playing with 3 or more players, and there is a section of optional fan rules with space to create your own. And I think it should be noted, Necromolds has developed quite a community since it first launched, and there is an active Discord server where the players share their ideas. This is a game that encourages creativity, play and community. And isn't that really the true essence of what hobby gaming should be? Isn't that exactly how we get new players to roll some dice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, because that is it from me for now. Please be aware, this expansion was provided for review, along with the Necromolds base game, by the designer Clint Bohati. I need to say a huge thank you to him for sending it, and of course, a huge thank you to you for watching. If you would like to check out Necromolds for yourself, you can order direct from the official website, which I have linked to in the video description below. If you do, let Clint know I sent you. And as always, if you like the video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.